Good morning, children. Today we are going to start from page 26, Genes and Genomes. What are genes? These are specific part, that is the DNA segment of a chromosome. So it is a specific part of chromosome which determines the hereditary characteristics. And according to the latest findings, there are nearly 19,000 genes in human. Chromosome number 1 has the largest number of genes, that is 2,968, and chromosome Y has the fewest, that is 231 genes on it. Now, what is genome? It is a full complement of DNA. So it is a full complement including all the genes and the intergeneric region of an organism. So it includes the genes and the space between the genes on a DNA. All that full complement of DNA is known as genome. Now, what are genes and their alleles? Normally, every gene has two alternative forms for a character, producing different effect. So two alternative forms of a gene are there, and those two alternative forms produce different effect. And these alternative forms are called alleles. For example, in the character of tongue rolling. Now, what is tongue rolling? It is projecting the tongue out of the mouth in the form of a tube. And there are two possibilities. Either one can roll the tongue or one cannot. Thus, there are two alleles of the gene. One for rolling and the other one for non-rolling. And the dominant and recessive alleles. The two forms of alternative forms of allele are, one is dominant, the other one is recessive. And out of the two alleles of a gene, one is dominant, that is it superrules, and the other one is recessive, that is it is submissive. It's not expressed in a person in the presence of dominant gene. To understand this, again, take a same example of tongue rolling. And of course, the genes for tongue rolling is located on a particular pair of chromosome. So it is present on a particular pair of chromosome and even the specific place on that chromosome. Thus, every individual has a pair of these genes, and it is a rule in genetics to represent the dominant gene by capital letter. So, the dominant gene is represented by a capital letter. Say if it is of tongue rolling, we represent it by capital R. And the recessive gene by the same, but small letter, that is small r, is non-rolling. So if a person is a non-roller or cannot roll the tongue, then the small r is used. It is a recessive character. Thus, a recessive gene is one which in the presence of the contrasting dominant gene is not expressed. So if out of a pair of genes, one is dominant, that is capital R, and the other one is recessive, that is small r. So only dominant one is going to be visible in a person, or the person is going to be a tongue roller, and the other one remains recessive. Now, alleles. These are the alternative forms of genes occupying the same position on a homologous chromosome and affecting the same characteristic but in a different way. If we take two chromosomes and any one specific gene, if we take, it is present at a specific place on the chromosome and it affects the same characteristic but in a different way. Like if it is a dominant one, its effect is different, and if it is a recessive one, the effect is different. And a pair of chromosomes showing 4 imaginary genes. Here we have a pair of chromosomes showing 4 imaginary genes, A, B, C and D. And the first one, if we take here, the capital A, on both the chromosomes, the gene which is present is capital A. That is dominant pair it is, and it is because similar, so we call it homozygous dominant. And the second case, the small b on both the chromosomes is again both the genes they are similar, or both the alleles they are similar, and they are a recessive pair, so we call it homozygous recessive. And the third case, here capital C represents the dominant gene and small one represents the recessive. And the two together, or the pair is known as heterozygous dominant genes, or heterozygous dominant is the constitution. And the next one again, the fourth one, here we have one recessive, the other one dominant, and the pair together it is going to be known as heterozygous dominant, because one gene is dominant, and these two dominant genes will not let the recessive character appear. And remember, the chromosomes as a whole can neither be dominant nor recessive. So if we talk of chromosomes, they can't be dominant or recessive. It is only the genes which can be dominant or recessive. Then next we come over to genotype and phenotype. Now the 3 situations pertaining to a pair of genes, as for example in tongue rolling, can be as follows. Like for tongue rollers, if we see, we can have genetic constitution capital R, that is both are dominant and the person is a tongue roller. And in second case, one is capital R, one is small r, that is one dominant and the other one is recessive. So again the person is a tongue roller. Why? Because this dominant character or this dominant gene will not let the other one appear or suppresses the other one. Now in the third case, both are small r and both are recessive, so the person is a non-roller. You can see from the above example that the tongue rollers have 2 kinds of genetic constitution, that is homozygous dominant and heterozygous dominant. And the non-roller has only one genetic constitution, that is homozygous recessive. And the genetic constitution pertaining to the kind of genes possessed are called genotype. So what is genotype? Genotype is the set of genes present in the cells of an organism. So what is the genetic constitution of an organism, or what are the set of genes which are present in the cells of an organism is known as genotype. And the express shown character is called phenotype. Thus, for a phenotype, for tongue roller, there are 2 genotypes. So, and what is phenotype? The observable characteristics which are genetically controlled. Now see, if you take the first case here, the observable character is that the person is tongue roller. This we can easily observe in a person. And the other one is again a tongue roller. because of the genetic constitution, that is, one of the genes is a dominant one. So here he says that the phenotype for tongue roller has two genotypes. One is homozygous dominant, the other one is heterozygous dominant. And in homozygous dominant, both the both the genes, they are similar, and the heterozygous dominant with dissimilar pair, that is, one is dominant, one is recessive. And the genotype of non-roller is just one single homozygous recessive pair, that is, both are represented by small r. So this much we do for today.